Welcome to another exciting episode of my channel. If you haven't already, check out the other videos I have. Lots of topics. I'm Dr. Miller, by the way. PhD, because I double up on the credentials because I'm insecure about myself. So make sure you check out the library, though. Lots of interesting topics. I've been kind of perusing a variety of them of late. And I have one that kind of is off the general main, the latest groupthink that I've had. This video is going to be about agility. You're more welcome to wait to the end of the video, watch the video, but please subscribe though. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs. I'm very insecure. So if I had 1,000 subs, I think I'd feel a little better about myself, and we could, talk about things like self-esteem and all this other crap. I would have a lot more of it, and I would feel better about myself and looking my kids in the eyes when I go home. Like, Daddy's doing something, guys. Like, he's up to 1,000 subs, right? You should be proud of me. Okay, so there's a lot of emotions. All right. Did I say you could like this video after? I think so. You can always wait to make that commitment later, but sub now, right? Okay. Let's talk about agility. And it's kind of I've been talking about hypertrophy lately, and difference between men and women, and testosterone. So, this channel, I've given myself license to talk about whatever the heck I want because I want to. And so let's talk about agility. What is agility? So if you're an athlete or are interested in changing direction better, agility's maybe this little video might be helpful if you're a strength coach, sport coach, even more so. Okay, first of all, let's define agility. It's usually misdefined. Running around cones where you're going. So if I say go up and hang a right, run 10 meters and hang a right 10 meters, that's not agility. That's change of direction. There is a difference. Agility would be, okay, I have a T formation, and you're going to start at the starting cone, run up on this middle cone. I'll stand in the middle, and I'll tell you which way to go. I could do a hand motion. I could yell something. I could have a sport ball that, or a soccer ball, and I kick it over to the left and you run to the left, or I kick it to the right, but you don't know which way you don't know what I'm going to do. I gave you two choices, right or left. I can make it even more difficult by I'm going to hold the ball and you just got to settle, or I'm going to kick the ball right at you, or I'm going to kick it behind you and you got to turn and run and get it. So I'm adding decisions to to this particular drill. That's agility. Agility is the perceptual part. Anticipation can be part of that, but perceptual part, and then the physical. So think about like older athletes. They say, oh, he or she's lost a step, but man, they can still play. Why? It's because their ability to take information and then select the right movement program is very fast. A lot of it could be just from years of watching, being involved in the sport. I tell the story of one of my I had a racquetball class in college. Yes, I did. And I like to play racquetball. I'm horrible at it. But the instructor would just whoop us. He's in his late 50s, but he even told a story. He's like, I was doing the racquetball tournament, and I'm in late 50s, and I'm pretty good shape, and I can run around. And he said he played this guy in his mid-70s. He's like, I'm going to whoop this old guy. And this old guy just wore him ragged. He's like, and he was a good racquetball player. And his point was this old guy just knew all the rebounds. He knew where the ball was going. He had seen enough racquetball that he could anticipate. And so even though he wasn't physically as gifted, he couldn't really move his feet like he used to. He could still place the ball well. He knew the sport. And in the same way, again, you can see an old player that can still read the game enough to be able to react and to execute the movements and make up for the lack of physical ability by anticipation. That could be in any athlete. It could be a younger athlete. Maybe they're not as physically gifted. I've seen this in my own athletic experience. Athletes that were not as physically gifted, but man, they could react to things far greater, shorter reaction times than other athletes. Now, on the other side, you can have athletes that are amazing athletically, but cannot really read situations very well. And they can make up for that lack of ability to read situations, and that can be developed, of course, I'm just saying in general, by their physical ability. But when that physical ability diminishes, or let's say they're really good in high school, their physical ability can make up for their lack of ability to read things. They get to college, and everybody's physical ability is about the same. Now that lack of ability to read things comes into be a problem. Okay, and so this is agility. This combination of being able to perceive things and react to them, and then select the movement pattern. Now, what does this mean in terms of training agility? It depends on the individual. So this is the whole idea of like the long-term athlete development model. And let's say you take a young kid, maybe like a 12-year-old, and you're like, well, should this individual do? And if you're not training 12-year-olds, you'll see the kind of what agility is. Should I have this athlete do agility training? And what if we define it properly? Should I have this athlete learn how to run around cones? And the answer actually may be no, and this is why. Maybe they're not ready to run around cones yet. So when we talk about skills, the discrete skill, and then you put it into a serial skill, right? So I might, in any one sports situation, somebody might sprint up 10 meters and then shuffle to the right 5 meters. Those are two skills, sprinting up and then shuffling. maybe this young athlete has no idea how to shuffle. And so you might have to start with, hey, let's do shuffle, shuffle, freeze, right? So shuffle, shuffle 5 meters, 10 meters. Okay. Freeze, see if they can stay on balance. If they fall over when they stop, they weren't on balance. You need to teach them how to shuffle. Teach them knee alignment. Teach them pushing out the inside of the foot. Teach them lowering their center of mass, right? All these things you got to teach them. Don't click their heels, right? Take smaller steps. All this stuff you're going to have to inform on this skill first. Then you could say, okay, run up 5 meters and then shuffle 10. Okay. They have to know how to run and shuffle first before they start. So when I say maybe it's not time for the run around cone drills, if you put the 4 cone drill out, sprint, shuffle, backpedal, shuffle, right to finish, or sprint, shuffle, backpedal, sprint to finish. What if the athlete can't backpedal with the crap? Like they just pop right up in the air and they're taking these little short stops, and some of them fall over because they're leaning too far backwards. They don't know how to keep their shoulders over their toes, right? They don't know how to bend their knees and their hips, right? They can't transition around the cone, so they're sharp edges. Like you cut your finger on them, they're so sharp, but they take these big, circles around the cone. So by the time they're done, you're like, come back, right? They don't know how to do the discrete skills first, right? So that athlete may benefit from that before you move them to a drill. Now they'll learn pretty quick if you teach them well, but this could be you as well. Maybe you're just starting out, and maybe you're older I want to get better at change of direction. Maybe you haven't mastered the basic skills yet. Not even putting them in a series, but you haven't mastered the basic skills. So let's assume in the ideal world, everybody masters the basic skills, which I've seen in high school athletes. A lot of them are just physically dominant. They don't move very well at all. Some of it's mobility these day and age. Kids are just stiff. I say kids under 17 years old are stiff from a lot of sitting down and playing video games and the rest. Okay. All right. So skills are down. Now you can move to cone drills where there's still no stimulus. It's just, run up, hang a right, or, all the different drills. I call it the top hat, or W drills, whatever you want to select. There's a bazillion of them. You can make up your own patterns. And this is the scaling of that as well. That being agility training, change of direction in this case, is the drills can get more complex as you go. Okay. You can incorporate again more series. Years ago, and this was 20 years ago when I was a college football player, we used to have pattern running. So you'd have your little book and you had all these patterns, and they were supposed to be, I don't know how specific they really were, but it's supposed to be specific to the position played. So if you're a defensive lineman, there were still 40s in there. I'm like, okay, I don't know how many 40s I ran in a game, maybe once or twice. And it's bad news if I did, because I'm chasing somebody down the sideline and I'm not going to catch him anyway. But, and then the wide receiver might have more longer, like actually just run routes, right? Because that's what they're doing. They run patterns anyway. A DB might have a lot of shuffling and sprinting and right? But I thought that was a fine way of thinking about this. So as you have patterns specific to the athlete, and they're getting more complex as the athlete gets more complex. So there's a progression in the drills. There's a progression in the athletes. If I have a beginning athlete again that hardly can shuffle, then I probably, even if they have a specific sport they're training for, they would benefit more from just more movement. This also plays into the long-term athlete development model, where we want athletes to play a variety of sports early on, not specialize. And I know that always the kickback is to say, well, if you haven't seen my survivorship bias video, watch that one. But that's what we're talking about is, well, what about this elite athlete that all they did was play this sport? True, but that's one of how many athletes that didn't make it as a result of specializing too early. I think that's the wrong way of thinking about this. So if we're going to be safe in how we build athletes or train athletes, okay, have them play a variety of sports. Okay, have them play, whatever sports are available. Have them play as many, and they don't have to be the similar ones. Soccer is very different than football. American football is very different than basketball or volleyball or whatever. The reason is because each one of those sports, there's going to be a footwork pattern or a change of direction pattern that is specific, or learning how to leverage hips if you're a wrestler or something like that. That's very specific to the sport, which will carry over then to other sports. So if you develop a footwork pattern in soccer that other basketball players are not developing, and you go play basketball and that's your real sport that you love, and you continue to play basketball, I'm just saying you or somebody else, athletes are coaching, that footwork pattern gained from soccer is going to be a benefit for the athlete playing basketball, because the other basketball players haven't seen those footwork patterns because they're specialized too early. Okay. Besides limiting the likelihood of overuse injuries and burnout, you also develop a more complete athlete. And then as the athlete, this is again, long-term athlete development kind of paradigm model, is that over time, then you can be more specialized. We specialize too early in the United States, especially. I don't know what it is in other countries. I think there's a mixed bag of that, especially with sports schools and such. I think we can get in trouble if we have inverted the pyramid. We get too specialized too quickly. And a lot of that's for a lot of reasons. Some of it's, environmental, kids aren't, it's not like when I was a kid, I would ride my bike and I don't know where I was half the time. And my mom was like, don't come back until the sun goes down. Right. Now it's like, little John, my kids get outside of my side of vision. I'm going to be hopping down the road wondering what's going on. Okay. Because of their culture, it's not a safe environment like it used to be. Less people doing growing up in agrarian cultures where they might be actually doing farmers walks with real feed, right? And doing real shoveling. And even agrarian life is more modernized. There's not as much of that as it was. So what I'm saying is there's less general movement. And we tend to force specialization on, especially young people, because we want them to be active, and sports seems to be the answer, which it isn't. The only answer, this is my new book, by the way, The Motionless Modern, I talk a little about this, is that we've used sports as a way of making up for the lack of general activity, and that's a mistake. That's a mistake. I love sports, but there's a difference between exercise and physical activity. There's a difference between sports and physical activity. And we've lost the physical activity component, and we're going to see an athletic performance across the board decline. You still have your freaks, but I think across the board you'll see a decline and maybe even a risk an injury, but that's just hypothesis, okay? Anyway, so more general movement for these young athletes to be better, more patterns. Years ago, and you have to probably look up on the old Google, this is how old I am, but there used to be Rolodexes. Okay. And a Rolodex was and maybe you didn't know it was called that, but and they're still around, I guess. But, you put business cards in them and there was a circle. So you could rotate it and you look through. It was based on like A, B, C, D, or the alphabet. And you find, Monson. And, Monson. Oh, Mr. Monson. Okay. I'll give him a call. All right. And then you rolled maybe Z's. All right. Mr. Zonson. And you call him Mr. Zonson. Sorry, Mr. Zonson, if you're out there. That's a Rolodex. So that's kind of what we're doing with agility is we're saying, okay, I see something. Here's my Rolodex. I'm going to look through it and find the pattern that fits this situation the best. Okay. Now, with young kids, what you're trying to do is develop as many patterns as possible. Like I mentioned before, soccer playing and playing basketball. So if you have a lot of patterns to choose from, that can be beneficial because if we've seen some athletes over time, like how did they get that? Wow, that was a unique footwork pattern, right? Or they're really explosive in this pattern that is unique to this sport, but it's transferred to this sport and they're really good at it. Well, it's because they did it in the other sport. So there's transfer is what I'm getting at. You have to have that pattern. So in young athletes, it could be biological age, more than likely biological age, but in also training age, developing a wide variety of Rolodex patterns is really important. Then there's something to choose from. Now, the perceptual part is a little harder. So I believe there's some innate talent. Well, there's innate talent to anything, but some people are better at this than others, just like they are at the running around cones, okay, is being able to see color and react to color. And I say that like in sports, right? I know my awesome days as a college football player, 10 years in the NFL. No, I didn't play any. I played FCS football. Yeah, I played in college and it was a lot of fun. But, when you're playing, I didn't see faces. I'm using my example, but you hear this from other athletes. Things are moving too fast to see faces. You get maybe this is why I'm a terrible athlete, but you get tidbits of things. You get color. You'd feel, right? Pressure. You knew where your hands were without knowing where your hands were. You get hit in the face, you knew where that came from. But this is all happening so fast that you have to react to it. And that's the point. Now, how do you build that reaction time? Playing the sport, more than likely. If I do a drill where you run up and I have a football and I say, go that way, or I wait till you get me and I tell them, okay, there's some benefit to that. And the more decisions I add, that's good because it challenges the athlete to start anticipating. So again, I mentioned before, it could be go forward or stop or right or left or an angle or throw it this way, catch it, whatever. Those are all good things, but it doesn't mimic the sport exactly. So when a younger athlete, some of those drills where there's a stimulus can be helpful because it teaches them, one, to sell out for the movement, like run up at full speed. Don't start anticipating. I want you to run full speed, then react. But as we get a more advanced athletes, where a lot of strength conditioning coaches will say, I'm not going to bother with teaching agility because the only way they're going to get better at agility is by doing their sport. And if it's a opportunity cost issue, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes on change of direction agility drills, even if I can make them agility drill, when I could have them lift weights, which will give them more benefit in this 20 minutes than doing these drills. Because they're going to lift weights and then go to practice. Going to practice is when they'll see color and pressure and feel pressure and all these things that they'll get better at actually perceiving. I can do something about the physical. And even running around cones in a more advanced athlete, after a while, they can get really good at running around cones. This is why, like, the NFL Combine is like, I mean, you can, yeah, how many great scores have been posted in the NFL Combine by athletes that didn't turn out to be a whole lot? And how many bad scores have been posted by athletes who ended up being great NFL players, right? And so I'm not saying there isn't any value in it, but it's not. It's harder to determine success when there's no external stimulus. Anybody can look good in their underwear running around, right? And jumping really high and all those and lifting weights but what's it like when they're actually playing? And so I think that does. I'm talking about advanced athletes now, so maybe I should have pinpointed this a little bit. I'm not talking about younger athletes. Younger athletes could benefit from running around cones because they don't even know how to do that yet. They're building their Rolodex. But when it comes to perception, the athletes anticipation and the visual cues that they're getting from the game, Young athletes will get that by playing as well, and they may get it from these drills that are more open-ended, meaning that they have to react to something. But when it gets to more advanced athletes, this is where I'm going with this. Like, let's say, college athletes and older college athletes, right? And maybe even some older high school athletes, depending on how good athletes they are, they may not gain as much benefit from spending a lot of time running around cones. Okay, because at this point they're going to need more practice with the actual game-like conditions. All right, so there's a progression to a quote-unquote agility training. Both things, change of direction and reading visual cues. I keep using the word perception, and that may or may not be the right term depending on the situation, but I'll say visual cues. The visual cues, the more visual cues you see, and the more coaching you get how to react to those are going to be better. And the more you see, then the more you can start to maybe anticipate. Sometimes you anticipate wrong, but over time, maybe you start to guess right more often than you guess wrong. That's part of anticipation. That can happen at any time. Change of direction can happen at any time. As the athlete ages, though, there's going to be less specificity in the change of direction drills, meaning they already got the patterns down. It might be better to do things that are maybe peripheral to changing direction better, like getting stronger, getting a little bit more stiffness, and don't even bother wasting time on building visual cues, because they're at the point now that just doing like right or left with the ball is not going to really change things. Okay, it's going to have to be more practice time. And if, usually what happens with the more advanced you get, the less time you have to train as well with all the rules, whether it's NCAA or whatever it is. And so you want to make the most use of your time, and the most bang for your time would be lifting weights or doing plyos or something like that. So I hope that makes sense. That's just a quick rundown on agility training. Last note I'll make, and I could talk about this a little bit more, but last note, remember that agility training is not conditioning, okay? You can use change of direction stuff in conditioning. I would just caution being careful with that, especially with young athletes. I mean, it's an easy way to blow at ACL. But if you're going to get better at changing direction, make sure the athlete's recovered. This is like sprint training. This is not something with a fast turnaround. This is, typically this team sports might be helpful. So maybe you have 15 athletes, they run through the drill. And by the time they ran through the drill, they've had time to rest, right? So that's the rest period, okay? Or you have them run through the drill and walk back. And by the time they get back, they may have 5 more people before they go again. But I want them fresh every time they do this. So that also means there's not a lot of reps. So you're not doing 15 rounds of this. You might, and I thought this was fairly well done when I was a GA many, many years ago, 20 years ago, for a strength coach that's at a very high level right now. But we'd have this, we had the field. So I was the cone guy. So I set all the cones out, right? And the athletes would just transition from these different stations. Now you could argue at Division I athletes, do they really need to do that? I saw some of those athletes, and maybe they did, but hypothetically, no, they probably don't need all those cone drills. This was part of like conditioning, summer conditioning. It was a big part of a program in general prep, but you could argue maybe that was unnecessary. Okay, the point was though is that they ran the drills hard and they came back. There's an NFL, he will remain nameless. He played in the NFL for like 6 years, wide receiver, really fast, and he ran a drill. It was a top hat drill, so he sprint up, shuffle, sprint, shuffle, and sprint to finish. And I was, at the end, you have to exhort these guys to finish. You want them to run fast. This is, again, a speed thing. So I would yell at these athletes, and I told the athlete, run through, and I was convinced he was sandbagging. He was holding back. So I sent him back. Pissed him off, right? Sent him back again. I sent him back twice. He was so pissed at me. Come to find out, I didn't know this. He was still a young guy. Then he hadn't proven himself. This guy went off for like 220 yards receiving against Oregon, and was I think the second leading wide receiver in yards in the nation that year. I mean, he was just freaking fast, and so what looked really lazy, he was just really efficient in his movements. But I always told him that he was the reason that he went to the NFL, because I would always send him back because he looked like he wasn't working hard. When in fact he was. He was just really fast. So anyway, hope you found this video helpful, and at least if you're interested in agility, if you stayed with me this long, again, programming, keep the volume light, make it about quality, not quantity. Multiple patterns, especially early on. They can be more sport specific as the athlete gets older. Remember the difference between change of direction and agility. Agility is the addition of some sort of stimulus that has to be reacted to, and you have to decide where along the journey that individual is, if that's beneficial to add that to the drill or not. And then you can be as creative as you want with these drills. There's some standards like the T-test and the 5-10-5 and the 5-0-5 and right, all these other these different drills. But the reality is you could be as creative as you want, especially if you're thinking one that's more sport specific. There was a study years ago about this is an interesting study. I'm trying to remember. It was looking at different change of direction patterns, and one of them was backpedal, turn, and run. And then backpedal, turn, and run. So learning how to turn the hips one way or the other and turn and sprint, and then settle back down and backpedal again, and then turn and sprint. That pattern was the most correlated that's a terrible word, was the most, had the strongest correlation, there we go, with playing ability than the other ones tested. I'll look for that study. I can't remember what it, but that stuck out to me, right? It was turning the hips, and these soccer, at least with these soccer players and this particular team, that was the most predictive of which athletes were the best, was their ability to turn and run. Well, if you knew that from the research literature, that probably should be part of your patterning repertoire, is teaching athletes how to backpedal and turn and run, right? Do a 180-degree turn and sprint. Okay, that should be part of your drills. So again, you can find things that are more specific to the sport, jump and sprint for a basketball player, something like that. Okay. Now you can make your decision if you like this or not. It was 20 minutes of talking about agility, and we'll see you in the next video.